I was the new organist at St. Jude's, a towering Gothic structure in the heart of the city. Most nights, I'd stay late, practicing until the church was utterly empty. The silence so profound, it felt like a physical weight. One particular evening, after everyone else had left and I was packing my sheet music, I heard it. A faint, almost imperceptible hum, like a distant engine. I dismissed it as old pipes settling. But then, and it started. A single low note, held longer than any human breath could manage, resonated from the organ. I froze, my hand hovering over a hymn book. I was alone. I knew I was. I walked to the console, peering into the shadows. Nothing. I tried to convince myself it was the building settling, or a draft. The next night, it was clearer. A slow, mournful chord, followed by another, distinct and deliberate. It wasn't a hymn I recognized, but a lament. It sounded lonely. I checked every door, every window, all locked. I even checked the organ's power supply, thinking maybe a malfunction. Everything was off. Yet, the music persisted, growing slightly louder each night I stayed. It wasn't always a full song, sometimes just fragmented melodies, like someone was struggling to remember a tune, or perhaps struggling to play at all. One night, the music shifted. It wasn't just a lament anymore. There was a specific pattern, a repetition. It sounded like a code, or perhaps a voice. I pressed my ear against the polished wood of the organ's console, the notes vibrating through the timbre. It wasn't coming from the pipes as much as it was coming from inside the organ itself. As I listened closer, a cold dread settled over me. The music was a series of distressed, pleading notes, forming a familiar sequence. It was the exact melody of the distress signal I had been taught in my childhood music lessons, a specific, urgent call for help, transposed onto the grand, echoing pipes. And it was playing it, over and over, from deep within the hollow, wooden heart of the ancient instrument. As sacristan, part of my duties included ensuring the church was always pristine, especially the older sections. The confessional booth, tucked away in a dimly lit corner, was often neglected. One Tuesday, I decided it needed a thorough cleaning. I stepped inside, the heavy door closing behind me with a soft thud, plunging me into near darkness. The air was thick with the scent of old wood and something else, something metallic and cold. As I began wiping down the grimy screen separating the two compartments, I heard it a faint whisper. I froze, my heart thudding. "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned," it began. But there was no priest, no penitent. I was alone. I even opened the door to check the nave. Empty. I told myself it was residual sound, an echo of countless confessions trapped in the old wood. But the whispers continued. Each time I re-entered the confessional over the next few days, they were there, clearer, more defined. They weren't random. They were full confessions. Sins of envy, pride, deceit. They were mundane, yet unsettling because they were spoken to an empty room. I started recording them on my phone just to prove I wasn't imagining it. The voices were always different, male and female, young and old. Then, one afternoon, as I knelt inside, attempting to decipher a particularly muffled confession, the voice changed. It became clearer, closer, and distinctly familiar. It was my own voice, but warped, hollow, and filled with a despair I'd never experienced. It wasn't an echo of a past confession. It was a confession being made right then, detailing actions and thoughts I had believed were buried deep within my own mind. Things I had never spoken aloud to anyone, not even in my most private prayers. I confess the resentment I harbor, the lie I told last week, to cover my mistake, the moment of satisfaction I felt at another's misfortune. The voice outlined my most hidden transgressions, each word chillingly accurate, each secret laid bare within that tiny, empty box, as if the confessional itself was demanding absolution from me. As the choir master, from the first to arrive and the last to leave, I know the rhythms of St. Augustine's like my own heartbeat. One chilly Tuesday morning, I arrived an hour early to prepare for a special rehearsal. The church was still locked, silent and dark. But as I approached the nave, a faint sound reached me. Singing. A full, harmonious choir, their voices rising and falling in a familiar hymn, "Abide with me." I paused, bewildered. No one was scheduled. I knew every member of my choir, and none of them would be here at this hour without my knowledge. I ascended the creaking stairs to the choir loft, my heart pounding with a mixture of confusion and a strange dread. The singing grew louder with each step, the harmonies perfectly blended, the alto section particularly strong. When I reached the top step, the singing abruptly ceased. The silence that followed was absolute, heavy, and more unsettling than the singing itself. The choir loft was empty. Every stand held an open hymn book, all turned to "Abide with me," the specific verses they had just been singing. The risers were perfectly aligned, but utterly devoid of human presence. I ran my hand over a hymnal. The pages were still cool, but not cold enough to have been left open overnight. This happened twice more that week. Always "Abide with me." Always just before I fully entered the loft, the singing would stop. I started to record it, setting up my phone before I approached. The recordings picked up only silence, followed by my own footsteps. One morning, however, I pressed record and waited at the bottom of the stairs, listening. The choir began their mournful rendition. As I listened, a chilling detail emerged. Within the chorus of voices, I could distinguish individual timbres, specific voices from my current choir people who were, at that very moment, asleep in their beds. Then, among their familiar tones, I heard another voice, thin and reedy, distinct from the others, but singing their own verse. It was my mother's voice, who had passed away years ago, singing a verse of "Abide with me" that she used to hum to me as a child, a verse that was not even in the church's hymn book, and she was singing it directly to me.